Okay, thanks. Hi. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me here. Um, so let's just see that we can. Okay, good. So I'm gonna talk tonight about one of my pet projects, actually. So it's not from work. It's about building a serverless member portal solution based on AWS Cognito, Lambda Functions, and S3. Basically, just gonna talk briefly through the agenda. Pretty straightforward, actually. Who am I, the problem, the solution, going into some details, maybe outlining what I have in mind for the future, and if you have any questions, either in the end or feel free to ask them at any point. Sorry. So yeah, what I am, I'm Michael, originally German, moved to Finland beginning of this year, 35 years old, not married, no kids, girlfriend by the way. Working as an engineering lead at Zalando here in Helsinki. You can find me on the various social networks like Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, LinkedIn, you name it. I'm a developer by heart. Unfortunately, not have too much time right now any longer to do development. I'm talking about JavaScript stuff today, but mostly I actually prefer Java on the backend, Spring Boot stack. Yeah, couple of words about the company I'm working for, Zalando. I don't know if you know it, or who does not know what Zalando does? Yeah, good. So we're actually selling fashion, but we're a pretty huge like tech company as well, operating in 15 countries all over Europe by now. We have like 5 tech locations, one of them in Helsinki, 6 warehouse locations. We made roughly about 3.6 billion in revenue last year, have around 200 million visits a month on our websites. Overall, like nearly 1,700 engineers working for us. We're more or less completely on AWS with some legacy systems on our data centers. Overall, we have like roughly 200 independent teams working there, and each team gets its own AWS account. So we're managing roughly about 200 AWS accounts, built some tooling around that stuff. So if you're interested in those topics, either approach me or like there is Ruben sitting in the audience as well, and Yuho, most probably if he hasn't left yet. So those guys definitely also know like how we run code on AWS, and then if you're interested, just let us know, and most probably we can schedule another talk about what we actually do for work. But now, coming to the fun part. So what's the problem? Well, I used to be the founder of our alumni association back in Munich where I studied, and well, we had this old version of a member portal solution. It's been written by some guy about roughly 10 years back. It's in Perl, built on his custom framework, doesn't make it easier to understand. Requires a very old version of Perl because uses some of the language features there. It breaks every now and then, so sometimes restarting Apache works, sometimes you need to restart the whole server. Yeah, that doesn't make it easier to actually use that stuff. And well, the server needs some maintenance, like updating on security fixes and the like. So I think we got hacked at least like twice or so there because nobody felt like going in there and installing those fixes. So yeah, we kind of decided that we need a new version for that, and then it has a couple of requirements. So from a functional perspective, we wanted to make sure that people can log in via username and or email and password for those who are like kind of typical computer science students afraid of any of the social networks. Beside that, we also like wanted to have them log in via Facebook and Google if they feel so, just to make it easy. Well, they should be able to update their personal data there, share some of their personal data information with the rest of the crowd there, and browse photos from some events. And yeah, non-functional ones, well, we want to make sure that we approve people who get access there because, well, for recruiters, it's obviously very nice to get access to computer science students and alumni, so that should be avoided if possible. We want to have audit trails for any changes in there just to make sure that we can see who actually changed information. And overall, the maintenance effort should be as low as possible because, well, we did this all in our free time beside normal jobs. So yeah, we looked around a little bit and then tried to come up with a solution based on AWS technology. I'm just going to walk you through to the main services we considered. So if you know them, just raise your hands and I'm going to skip explaining those services. First one being AWS Simple Storage Service for storing basically the event photos as well as all the rest of the data there. The other one was Lambda Functions. We just heard about them, what you can do. So just run some simple code without actually running a server. It's basically backed on stuff that works with AWS identity and access management stuff, so roles, profiles, and then attached policies. And the whole login stuff is utilized using AWS Cognito, so that kind of just makes it easier for you to manage those temporary IAM credentials and roles and the like. And it can do a lot of nice stuff like federated identity, so you can log in with Google and Facebook and can actually combine those easily to represent the same identity. Yeah, so basically how it looks like, we have some web app in the front built on a very standard stack, React.js, Redux. We're going to store that stuff on AWS S3 because we're going to use S3 anyway. It's static, so why not there? We put CloudFront in front of it to serve it over HTTPS because S3 does not allow this for custom domain names, and we want to have our custom domain name. Yeah, login is possible with Google and Facebook and Twitter and email. Well, actually, right now it's only Facebook and email. Google and Twitter are still on the roadmap to build it. Yeah, authentication is done via Cognito SE, as I said. And yeah, basically how Cognito does that stuff. So Cognito has a differentiation between a user who is not authenticated and one who is authenticated. So for the one who is not authenticated, that gets this unauthenticated role from Cognito, so you can still give them, for example, access to, I don't know, browse low-resolution versions of your event photos that are stored on S3, so you do not have to make them public to all, but at least make sure that people log in via your website, and therefore you can easily like prevent them to integrating your photos on a different domain, for example. And then when you're logged in, you get this authenticated role, which then can give you more privileges to, for example, store your personal data and the like. But what we did there is that our authenticated role from Cognito only allows you to do the sign-up flow. So you can basically create your account there, and then sign up means that you put in your personal information that we want to verify, so your name, when you actually graduated from the university and the like, and that's all you can do. So you cannot yet view any of the other member information. You cannot like kind of not even view your own information. You can just put it there, because otherwise you could easily abuse that system for sharing any random content there. So you just sign up and then put random stuff into your name, which might happen to be some passwords or, I don't know, copyright infringement material and the like. So therefore, unless we like kind of approved and then verified you, you can only put stuff there. So the worst case that's gonna happen is that you're gonna dump a lot of bullshit on our S3 buckets. Well, we can always clean that up. And yeah, once you're approved, then we know that you get this like unique identity from Cognito, and we add that one to your EIM role, and only those users whose Cognito IDs we put into the policies can actually then do like additional stuff like reading your own data and then reading others' data and the like. So that's basically the overall concept. From a detail level is that's how the EIM roles look like. So on top there you see this is like the authenticated role, which only allows you to delete your information, put new one up there, or just see if it exists. And this is done like your bucket there, and we define some folder structure. So this is your basic account, and this is what comes in from Cognito. So this is the specific ID of your federated identity, and you can put in your like basic information. And then stuff to actually read the objects, they are only added if you're authenticated, and then you get the stuff like this here. So you have a condition for this specific policy, which matches if this cognito-specific audience is our cognito, our cognito realm, and if the identity is, and we would then put your identity in there. So overall, if we have like 100 users, then we would have 100 UIDs of those users in there who are approved, and they then get like the additional properties on the EIM role. Yeah, that's the only one of the very few points where we actually need the Lambda functions, because changing EIM roles is not yet supported on the browser version of the JavaScript SDK, and therefore this is what happens on the Lambda function. So it is called via the normal handler one, and we get access to the EIM stuff. We submit the cognito ID on the payload, and then it just gets the specific, like this is here define which policy on the role we want to add it, and it just looks through there, and if it finds that there is some of those conditions there where it needs to put in the cognito ID, and then pushes it in there if it's not yet in. This one is basically for approving a member, and if we would like block a member, we would simply just call the reverse function, which would then remove this specific user's cognito ID from that policy, and yeah, therefore the user gets an access when the next time visits our website. Yeah, on the front end, this looks pretty straightforward. React.js code, put in some, like, put in your name and the number, and again, you can update your profile, and what it does here is it basically, as you're logged in with Cognito, it can do this credentials refresh, which will make sure that it has the actual correct temporary credentials, and then on the credentials it gets your identity ID. That's basically this UID string we always also saw previously, and then it updates your profile information by constructing the bucket key on S3 and putting this into a file like naming convention. This is just your personal version. This is not the shared one, so this is the version you can only yourself can read, and yeah, that's the key, and then just puts the like kind of content as a JSON, and just yeah, writes it as a pretty plain text JSON file on the S3 bucket. That also like makes it easy if you just want to browse the data that is in there. You can use the command line tool, for example, and just sync all the buckets content down to the local machine, and just yeah, view it in whatever your editor you like. That's a little bit like kind of highlighting the structure we did on the S3 bucket. So there is the accounts, is very basic account information. This one is currently in development, like the photo sharing stuff. This is your profile information. And the rows one we thought we need in the beginning, but we actually dropped this one, so it would also allow us for doing some additional role management based on our own roles. So for someone to upload photos, which we could not easily do. Like in the end, the idea was to have it easier than just do it on EIM roles, because they cannot be read on the front end. So we thought we just store that information as plain text JSON files there. Never actually got there. Yeah, viewing stuff on the client is in the end is the same stuff. So you would just get the specific public profile ID. You could always list over those, so you could get the random IDs, and this like getting a specific one is just using that public JSON file, and you have, if you're approved, then you have the access to read all those JSON files and just get the information out there. Yeah, you might wonder why we actually choose to run with S3 rather than using DynamoDB or stuff like that. In the end, it was just we knew we need S3 anyway for actually storing the website and storing the photos. So it was just a decision to not introduce an additional service someone would need to learn. So it's, in the end, we could have gone with Dynamo as well, just didn't do it. Yeah, so what we're planning in the future there, Sorry. Well, currently you can update your profile information directly on the client side. So there's a JavaScript function that writes the JSON file and stores this on the S3 that works if all members behave nicely and do not like circumvent our editing UI. But in theory, you could get like all the credentials you would need and could just fork those calls and just store random data on your profiles. But we said as we have this approval process prior and we know who actually uses the application, like the threat based on that is like kind of acceptable. But again, using Lambda functions there, we could impose some constraints on how the data should look like, or make sure that an email address is really an email address, or that a phone number is really a phone number, or that, for example, your first name only contains like 100 characters and not like 5,000 and blows up the whole UI. But as I said, like kind of we approve the people anyway and then could blame them if they abuse it. So acceptable risk. What I said, like currently we're trying to do this photo management section. So we at least run a yearly event where we have like kind of this alumni graduation ceremony stuff, and there's a lot of photos there. So the idea is that you can simply like upload one version, which we get out of the photographer's digital camera, and then have some magic there, which will render like smaller versions to preview and the like. And then we've been basically thinking about stuff we saw in the previous talk about how you can hook up Lambda functions if stuff is put into an S3 bucket, just get the callbacks. And so you would basically only upload the huge version, and then the Lambda function would be triggered and then create the preview versions of the photos. The next one is just a rough idea, doing event management. So you could create events. We're thinking about the same structure we currently already have, like utilizing our S3 buckets, creating an event. You would need to have a specific role. If you have that role, then you could write to that events bucket and create a new event there, and maybe automatically link it to photos and the like. Yes, as I said, one of the next features will most probably actually be the additional social logins. So Twitter, Google, they're kind of straightforward. On Cognito, you just need to put in your respective IDs and just make sure that you get the correct callbacks from the social networks and pass on the access tokens. And yeah, another one is once we have the social logins, definitely have some sharing functions for the photos, so just to make it viral and the like. That's basically it. The code will be on GitHub soonish, I promise. Just trying to stripe down what we currently have as like the internal version and make it a little bit more abstract and not so much tied to our version. And the plan is to release it as a kind of type of blog series post which would walk you through to how to actually build this up. So have different versions on the repository to see like the first one, like get the whole stuff set up and then like implement the login via email or implement the login via Facebook. And yeah, I think the slides are shared anyway afterwards. So like this stuff in here is clickable, should bring you to the respective sites on the net. And if you're interested, have a look. I'll be happy to get feedback if you'd like to share some stuff, improvement ideas. Otherwise, you can reach me out on social network stuff or via email. And if you have any questions, feel free. Sure. Well, the question was if this was more an engineering challenge, why we built it that way, or if there was like some requirement other frameworks did not have. I think it was mostly a engineering idea of can we do it this way? It was out of personal interest of a couple of us, just wanted to have a look at how Cognito works and then how we can integrate that stuff and play around with standard AWS stuff. I think one of the requirements that actually drove us a little bit in that direction was the idea to have it as low maintenance as possible, like not having the necessity to administer server and keep like track of the security updates on the low level infrastructure. That's basically what drove us to serverless architecture. Okay, so the question is how we do handle caching of the JSON objects if we have CloudFront in front of it. Yeah, basically if we create the stuff what you haven't seen in the reduced code examples in there, or what we have in mind is to set the correct cache headers. Currently it's pretty straightforward. CloudFront uses a very low default caching time of just 60 seconds. So it's not really utilizing the caching function of CloudFront, but rather the HTTPS termination part. Now, overall the idea is that we would like set correct cache headers on the JSON objects once we put them on the bucket. There was a couple of questions. Yeah. A little bit. So it basically what it does. I think it was more born as a framework to be used by native mobile apps as well. So they have integrations for Android and iOS as well as the web. Beside the just identity management stuff, it actually offers possibilities to synchronize data and to also like do the offline synchronization of data. So you can store user information incognito, and then the Cognito system will make sure that it's going to be synchronized across your devices. So if you have, for example, if you have an Android and an iPhone device and it's most of the times you, then you can edit stuff on the one device. It will store it on the local cache of Cognito, and once it has network connectivity, it will sync it up to AWS, and the second device will again then sync it down. And then so I think that's actually where it offers stuff way beyond what we use in there. So we just use it as a federated login system. Yes, it's basically like all the AWS systems. It integrates into the AWS SDK. There is additional libraries on top of the yes. So I think there's like 2 additional SDKs from AWS that's been built on top of the standard SDK that handles a lot of the complexity. So in what it is doing underlying is it uses the AWS IAM functionality of this web assume role stuff. So you could do this with plain IAM stuff as well, or at least mostly plain stuff. Cognito just makes it way easier. So you just say, well, log in, and this is my user, and then it takes care of giving you the temporary roles and assigning all that stuff. So it's, from a usability point of view, definitely a benefit. The question was whether we thought about using the metadata of Cognito instead of storing it in S3. Yes, we thought about that stuff. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure why we decided against it. I think one of the main reasons was actually this possibility to have public and private information in there. Yes? Okay, so the question is whether Cognito also supports like real-world use cases beside Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Yes, it does, as it integrates with AWS IAM stuff, so you can plug in any SAML source, for example, or your own user. So it offers a AWS-hosted user pool, which basically allows for username password integration. But if you have a SAML provider in your organization, you can just hook it up and use normal SAML logins, and then you can use those. Like you could have your web front end which redirects to your SAML endpoint and then gets the redirection back into AWS AIM solution, and you would be authenticated using your SAML provider. OAuth stuff works as well, yes.